Divorce mediation, in my opinion, is the way to go. I tell people that almost everybody can have their divorce mediated. There is a common misconception out there that you have to have all of the details wrapped up in a nice little bow and come to me at my office and tell me how you want things to be. And sometimes people think that if they're not in that situation, if they have a high conflict relationship, if this is a complicated situation, if there is a lack of trust, if they don't agree on everything, they think that that immediately takes them out of the running to do it as a mediation. And I always tell them that they're wrong about that almost every case can be mediated. I have mediated high conflict situations, and it hasn't always been easy, but we've got it done. In mediation, both spouses go to the mediator together. And so I'm an attorney, but when I'm acting as a mediator, I'm in a much different role. I'm not looking out just for one or the other. I'm not using the law to advocate for just one's position. So we will discuss the law to some extent, but only to the point where they have some understanding so that they can sign a settlement agreement that says that they understand everything that's in the agreement. But I will not use the law to advocate or to argue for just one's position. We sit down in a very calm manner and we discuss the issues that we have to go through in order to have a complete settlement agreement at the end. And so we will discuss the law to some extent, but it will be a discussion of, does this make sense for you? What might your options be? How else can we look at this situation? What are your underlying concerns that make you feel a certain way about a particular topic? And how can I work with the two of you to get you to some common ground and some resolution? And so it is working with one professional, but I always tell my clients that they have to know that they have the right to have an independent consulting attorney to work with on the side if they want to. They don't have to. One spouse may decide to work with a consulting attorney and the other may waive their right to work with a consulting attorney. It's totally up to the couple, up to the individual. Mediation is completely different from litigation. It is the best way to keep the process within your control. And that is with respect to timing, expenses, the provisions of your settlement. It is the best way to keep everything within your control. Litigation can get very out of control very fast. You have to show up at court when you are ordered to be there, even if that's a day that's not convenient for you, even if that's a day that there's an event at your child's school, or you have a doctor's appointment, or it's your birthday and you don't feel like being there. But in mediation, you can select the day, the time, the location. We can meet by Zoom if that's more convenient for you. So you have a lot of control over that. And you also have a lot of control over the expense and the cost of all of this, because this is such an expensive process. And that is not lost on me. So when I'm working with a couple in mediation, I actually use the expense of all of this as a way to motivate them to stay on track, to stay on course, and to only talk about the issues at hand, not to tell me about a fight they had a few years ago or the reasons why they may feel that they're here. I really try to always bring them back to the substantive issues that we need to get through in order to get them to an agreement. Yes, so the timeline of mediation really works well for people because we can fit the process to whatever your individual needs may be. We can go as fast or as slow as you'd like to go. I have some clients that have a standing appointment with me, Mondays at a certain time, every Monday for the rest of the month until we get it done. I have other clients that want to come in once and then maybe take some time to think about some of the options that we talked about and take some time to let that sit and figure out how they want to proceed. And maybe I don't see them again for another month or two. And that's fine. That's what's so nice about the process. And we will have however many sessions we need to get through all of the topics that we have to cover. That is usually about 3 to 4 sessions for those couples who have children, young children. And it can certainly go much faster, and it could certainly take much longer. But again, that's how it stays within your control. I share this one example with people to give them an idea of how long it's going to take. The longest mediation I ever had went 13 sessions. And that was because those people wanted to talk about every detail you could imagine. They wanted to put a provision in their agreement about what would happen with the children's teeth when they fell out, like the tooth fairy teeth. And I share that as an example with clients in a consultation to give them an idea of what, in my opinion, may be pretty excessive, certainly provisions that aren't necessarily enforceable. But for that couple, that's what they needed in order to be able to navigate the years ahead of them with young children. They wanted that level of detail, and I was happy to help them work through that and provide that to them. And for them, that agreement is very, very useful. But that's not common, and that is pretty excessive by most standards. And most people can expect to go about 3 or 4 sessions if they have children. The way the mediation process works is that we will have however many sessions we need in order to get through all of the topics that we have to cover. When you work with me, I like to provide my clients with something called a memo of understanding. So when we start, it starts as a blank list of all the topics that we have to cover. And as we meet together every time, I'm filling that in with my notes about what we discussed. What, if anything, might the couple be locking into and seem to be in agreement on? What may be some options that they'll want to consider, some information they need to gather before the next session. And they get a copy of that memo of understanding after every session, so that we all have the same information. If they do have a consulting attorney, they can go back and share that information with them. And it's a work in progress that they have as we go through all of our sessions. Once we get to the end of the session time, the memo of understanding is complete, and then we have our framework for a proper separation agreement or settlement agreement. So that is what, when I say may take 3 to 4 sessions if you have children, and probably go much quicker if you do not have children, that is just to get you through the memo of understanding. And then at that point, that is turned into a proper legal document. So it goes from like 7 or 8 pages, very easy to understand, not even improper sentences most of the time, just my shorthand, to then being turned into a proper legal document that would be acceptable to the court, probably 30, 40 pages in length. And at that point, that is filed with the court. And then from there, it can vary about how long it will be until your divorce is finalized and the court signs a judgment of divorce. I would say everyone can consider mediation. The only prerequisite to a mediation is to have 2 parties that are willing to voluntarily participate in the process. In my opinion, as long as we have that, we can at least give it a shot. And that's the nice thing about mediation. You can start, and it's a purely voluntary process. If at any point you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel like it's working for you, you are free to stop the process, and there would be no harm done. When it comes to mediation, the thing that I tell my clients is that it can work for almost anyone. If you have 2 parties who are willing to participate, then I would say that you should give it a shot. It is the best way to keep the process within your control with respect to cost, timing, and the provisions of your settlement agreement. It is the perfect way to reach an agreement that is tailor-made for your family. So if you're interested in learning more about it, please call us at the Joseph Law Group for a consultation.